Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show.
I'm deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we got to overcome a lot of things.
That's the sound of President Joe Biden as he sat with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after arriving in Tel Aviv to show support for the Israeli government after the attack by Hamas on October 7th. We are now approaching 2 full weeks of retaliation from the Netanyahu regime, in which over 1,300 children have now been killed. You heard the president addressing the bombing of the Al-Aqli Baptist Hospital in Gaza, a children's hospital in which the Gazan Health Ministry claims that nearly 500 people were killed in the strike. Now, Israel has vehemently denied any responsibility for the strike. And as you could hear in that clip of Joe Biden, he believes that it was done by the other team, that it was done by Hamas.
I was deeply saddened and outraged by the explosion at the hospital in Gaza yesterday. And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we got to overcome a lot of things.
There's a lot of people out there unsure, mainly because initially the digital spokesperson for the IDF took responsibility for it on Twitter. We'll discuss that later. But afterwards, the IDF came out and vehemently denied it. Here is a clip of Rear Admiral Daniel Haggerty as he discusses why this was not the IDF, followed up by a question from a journalist that was so salient and so important. The follow-up question was this: how can anyone trust the IDF when they have a long track record of lying about these issues?
Unlike Hamas, the IDF launched an immediate examination, which was overseen at the very highest levels of command. This professional review was based on intelligence, operational systems, and aerial footage, all of which we cross-checked. The evidence, which we are sharing with you all, confirms that the explosion of the Ali al-Mahadani hospital in Gaza was caused by an Islamic Jihad rocket that was misfired.
So I'd like you to address the question of credibility, because frankly, the IDF has a less than perfect track record with the issue of credibility. Among other incidents, the Israeli government initially claimed that it was armed Palestinian militants who killed the journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, which we know is not true. So why should the world trust you now?
Because of the importance of credibility, and in the past we had ourselves were fast to go to conclusions. This is why in this event we took the time. It took us more than 5 hours.
5 whole hours.
We wanted to double check everything.
They wanted to double check everything. Again, that was the IDF Rear Admiral Daniel Haggerty being questioned with an excellent question. Why should anyone believe the IDF at this point when the track record shows that they have a history of lying? And why this particular strike? Because this is not the first hospital that has been struck in Gaza. Why deny this particular strike? Here is the Palestinian ambassador to the UN, Riyad Mansour, as he calls out Israel and specifically Benjamin Netanyahu for lying about the attack on the children's hospital.
The Israeli prime minister today said, and I quote, the intelligence from multiple sources said that it's the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch. Your response?
He is a liar. His spokesperson and digital spokesperson tweeted that Israel did the hit, thinking that there is around this hospital a base for Hamas, and then he deleted that tweet. We have a copy of that tweet, and Talal can share with you that tweet.
Now, I have a copy of the tweet as well, and it is the same tweet that I mentioned earlier in today's episode. This is the IDF digital spokesperson taking credit for it on Twitter, saying the following, quote, Israel Air Force struck a Hamas terrorist base inside a hospital in Gaza. A multiple number of terrorists are dead. It's heartbreaking that Hamas is launching rockets from hospitals, mosques, schools, and using civilians as human shields. Hashtag Hamas is ISIS. Now, the digital spokesperson for the IDF has since deleted that tweet, and he has apologized for making that quote unquote mistake.
His spokesperson and digital spokesperson tweeted that Israel did the hit, and then he deleted that tweet.
So the digital spokesperson for the IDF initially took credit for it on behalf of the IDF, on behalf of Israel, and now they're denying it. But why deny this particular airstrike when there have been so many other hospitals hit?
Now they change the story to try to blame the Palestinians.
More from Ambassador Mansour.
It is a lie, and the Israeli spokesperson of the army, about a week ago, made a statement in which he said, evacuate the hospitals are target, and in fact they hit one hospital a week ago. So their intentions is evacuate or hospitals will be hit, and they are responsible for that crime, and they cannot fabricate stories to deal with it.
And again, from the highest levels of power on the face of this planet, from Joe Biden down to national security experts, down to just influencers on social media, they have all resoundingly rejected the idea that this could have been done by the IDF. And there's a second narrative going on stating that the explosion actually wasn't big enough to kill that many people. Photos have emerged from the scene showing primarily the parking lot of the hospital being completely burned out, and that has added to the confusion. Now, the question is, did the explosion kill that many people? Here is a report from BBC, a reporter from the BBC, stating the explosion from his perspective was big enough to kill hundreds and was too big to have been a misfired missile from the Islamic Jihad.
The military has been contacted for comment, and they have said that they are investigating. But, it is hard to see what else this could be, really, given the size of the explosion, other than an Israeli airstrike or several airstrikes. Because, when we've seen rockets being fired out of Gaza, we never see explosions of that scale. We might see half a dozen, maybe a few more people being killed in such rocket attacks, but we've never seen anything on the scale of the sort of explosion.
And it was the scale of the explosion that made many believe that it was done. This strike on this children's hospital was done by Israel. However, the waters are so muddy right now. Dr. Karl Mack would call this the malaise, or the fog of war, as I've seen others reference it. It's a reference to a book about Vietnam and how difficult it was to actually track what was happening. The malaise is so thick around this. And I guess that's to be expected, because who could take credit for this atrocity? Who would? Now, photographs have emerged showing that it was primarily the parking lot that was leveled and burned out. The vehicles are all burned out, bringing into question how many people actually died there. The fog of war is so thick that not only are both sides able to lay the blame on the other, and both sides have effective echo chambers to push that narrative to the top. And so, depending on what you believe, you have enough of an echo chamber to feel comfortable in your belief. But it's also so thick. The fog of war is so thick that we're not even sure how many people died in that strike at this point. But the fact of the matter is that people are dying. Palestinian people are dying every single minute of this campaign. One of the few bright spots in all of this horror has been the number of Jewish voices, Jewish Americans who have stood up and rejected the strikes by Benjamin Netanyahu, by Israel, making it clear that they don't want this done in their name. They do not want what's happening done in the name of the Jewish people. Here's a clip of two protests that took place in Washington, D.C. The first is in the Rotunda, and it is of Jewish Voice for Peace, making it clear they don't want this atrocity done in their name. Not in our name, they chanted as hundreds of them filled the rotunda on Capitol Hill. Here is a clip of the protest in front of the White House by Jewish Voice for Peace and ifnotnow.org. And I just want you to hear the beauty of what they're calling for and how they are calling for a ceasefire. Absolutely stunning, audience.
Ceasefire now. 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 Ceasefire now.
Both of those clips were brought to us by independent journalist Chuck Modi. You can find his work on Twitter at ChuckModi1. It just resonates with me to see so many thousands of Jewish people here in the United States willing to get arrested and put their bodies and their health on the line. They were all wearing masks during this pandemic, but they're putting their lives, their bodies on the line to say to President Joe Biden, cease fire now. Here's Joe Biden speaking to the humanitarian crisis that's happening.
People of Gaza need food, water, medicine, shelter. Today I asked the Israeli cabinet, who I met with for some time this morning, to agree to the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza.
Now, if I'm going to be 100% honest with you, this statement is extremely frustrating when, in the backdrop, Israel has requested from the United States $10 billion in emergency aid to wage this conflict against Gaza, because that's what's happening. What's frustrating about this is that the president of the United States has the ability to put pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to call for a ceasefire so that we can get the independent investigation into the bombing of the children's hospital, so that we can get humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza so that we can save as many lives as possible. President Joe Biden has the ability to call for a ceasefire, and there are several members of Congress, mostly the squad, from Cori Bush to Jamal Bowman to Ilhan Omar to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and about 8 others. They have all called for the president to call for a ceasefire. But instead of calling for a ceasefire, he is standing in Tel Aviv, or rather he stood in Tel Aviv today alongside Benjamin Netanyahu, who said this about the president.
Mr. President, for the people of Israel, there's only one thing better than having a true friend like you standing with Israel, and that is having you standing in Israel. Your visit here is the first visit of an American president in Israel at a time of war. It is deeply, deeply moving.
I'm not sure if deeply moving would be the way I would describe the visit, but that's just me. I want you to listen to this clip. I will read the translations based on the subtitles, but I want you to listen to this clip of a doctor expressing her outrage over what was happening in Gaza. And I'll be reading the subtitles, but I need you to hear her voice. And I also want you to juxtapose this with the fact that Doctors Without Borders has just released a statement stating that doctors in Gaza are now carrying out operations without any anesthetics. Words don't suffice. I swear nothing that I say is enough after what's been done to us. We've never seen anything like this. These are young children who are dead. The children are dead. We're unable to get to everyone. We're unable to get to everyone. Look at us. Our blood is not cheaper than others. This is cruel. This is cruel. This is cruel. We don't know where to put the kids. We don't know where to put the adults. The women are exposed. The men passed away. The elderly passed away. How cruel. May God have mercy on the people of Palestine who are suffering. I don't care about the political posturing, the propaganda games. At the end of the day, the bodies are piling up, and that has to stop. Cease fire now. We'll be back with more of the Benjamin Dixon Show right after this.
I never switch sides, like even when I die, I'ma ride for the squad, let her ties in the hearse. I
back to The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Yep.
Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Coming up in our patrons only episode, I have to just really, I have to take a step back from presenting the news to you all, because what's going on in Gaza is really doing something to me. And I imagine it's doing something to you emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. It's just extremely difficult to watch what's happening there and to carry on as if things are normal. They most certainly are not. In fact, we have not had normalcy for at least 3 years, but now this seems to be the capstone course of intolerable circumstances. Patreon.com/the BPD show. We'll talk about it more. Here in the United States, the chaos is the point. The House of Representatives is going into week 3 without a Speaker of the House for the first time in the history of this empire. And it is because of the chaos that has been wielded by the Republican Party. I have to tell you, anytime a party uses chaos as a strategy externally, it is inevitable that that chaos will eventually be wielded internally. And we saw that happen a few weeks ago when Matt Gaetz from the 1st Congressional District of Florida issued a motion to vacate the office of the Speaker of the House successfully. They were successful in getting rid of a speaker, but they have been completely unsuccessful at replacing that speaker. First, Kevin McCarthy is ousted. Then Steve Scalise of Louisiana thought he would give it a go. He couldn't get the votes. And now Jim Jordan thought he could get the votes. I'm not quite sure why Jim Jordan ever thought that. But here we are with 3 weeks of the nation not having a Speaker of the House, effectively bringing all work in the House of Representatives to a halt at a most critical time in world history. Here is Speaker Pro Tem Patrick McHenry of the 10th Congressional District of North Carolina, showing that not only did Jim Jordan fall short of the number needed to become Speaker of the House, he got fewer votes today than he got yesterday.
The tellers agree in their tallies that the total number of votes cast is 433, of which the Honorable Jim Jordan of the state of Ohio has received 199. The Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 212.
And of course, that is the sound of the Democratic Party applauding Hakeem Jeffries, who is the leader of the Democratic Party there in the House of Representatives, getting more votes, 212, all 212 of the Democrats. They voted in coalition together for Hakeem Jeffries. He got more votes than Jim Jordan. Some 20 Republicans opted to vote against Jim Jordan for many reasons. Here is one. This is Republican Representative Ken Buck of the 4th Congressional District of Colorado explaining to Morning Joe why he could not support Jim Jordan.
I am concerned that Congressman Jordan has not agreed to say that Donald Trump lost the election and Joe Biden won the election. I'm concerned that the events leading up to January 6th included Congressman Jordan participating, not in the riots or anything like that, but participating in the challenge to the election in ways that I think are really inappropriate. And I think that Republicans that run in the future are going to have to run on Jim Jordan's actions, and that's going to be very difficult for them.
I mean, that's pretty pragmatic to consider that Jim Jordan is an election denier who participated in the January 6th insurrection by voting against certifying the results, and then that later on being held, or Republicans who support Jim Jordan being held accountable for everything he does as Speaker of the House. And I have a lot more clips, but I just got to take a pause here and say, Democrats, you're playing it kind of close. Because if Republicans ever get in formation and decided to give the nation someone like Jim Jordan, we would have an insurrectionist as the Speaker of the House. But thankfully, after 2 votes, he has failed both times, and his prospects don't look that much better today. But that leaves the United States House of Representatives without a Speaker of the House. That is a level of dysfunction that shows that chaos can be used to paralyze our government from being able to function. I mean, we clearly can see that the Republican Party is incapable of governing because they are incapable of operating without creating more chaos and confusion. Those are the tools that they use to get power. And so it is only fitting that their chickens have come home to roost, and now they are unable to, with the majority, they're unable to move as a block in order to put a Speaker of the House back behind the Speaker's rostrum. And to be certain, I am extremely relieved that it's not Jim Jordan, because Jim Jordan is an insurrectionist. It would be so dangerous to have him as Speaker of the House. He's not only an insurrectionist, but he's an individual, as you'll hear in this clip from Representative Tom Cole. He's someone who will target Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid.
But unlike any other speaker we've had, he's had the courage to talk about a long-term plan and to get at the real drivers of debt. And we all know what they are. We all know it's Social Security. We all know it's Medicare. We all know it's Medicaid. No president of either side has been willing to deal with this. No speaker of either side has been willing to deal with this. This is the guy that wants to create a debt commission, a bipartisan debt commission, and get at the roots of our spending problem. That takes courage.
Now, there's a handful of Republicans clapping there, but a handful of those handful voted against Jim Jordan, and I believe it's because no one wants to be caught cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. They want to cut it. Don't get me wrong. Republicans have been salivating at cutting those programs for decades, but they just don't want you to say it out publicly like that, Tom Cole. You've been there since 2003. You have to know that by now. But I love when they say the quiet parts out loud. But there is no question. We have a dysfunctional Congress. We have elected officials who are playing games with the American people. Matt Gaetz, who initiated all of this from the 1st Congressional District of Florida, he issued the motion to vacate that initiated all of this. And now here we are 3 weeks later without a Speaker of the House. And the House of Representatives cannot go about the business of the people. And I think that's the point. I think the game that is being played on America right now is using as much confusion and chaos as possible to bring the United States government to a standstill at one of the most critical points in world history. All right, we're going to take this break, and when we come back, there's so much more to cover, more of the Benjamin Dixon Show after this.
Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and get twice the content and unfiltered interviews without any of the commercial interruptions.
Here we go. Very special welcome to 3 new patrons. Inaba DD, thank you so much for becoming a patron. John F, thank you for becoming a patron. And Frankie, thank you so much for becoming a patron. This entire patron party is for the 3 of you. Go ahead and turn it up. Oh, here we go. You too can become a part of this prestigious and most prodigious patron family by going to patreon.com/The BPD Show, where you get twice the content, none of the commercial interruptions, and you get access to our upcoming patron party. You do not want to miss it. Patreon.com/The BPD Show. And we will be back after this commercial break. Unless you are a patron, you get no commercials.
Welcome back to the Benjamin Dixon Show. Visit us online at thebenjamindixonshow.com.
Welcome back. Yep. Welcome back. Coming up in the Patrons Only episode, not only will I be discussing why it is okay to allow yourself to feel what is happening in Gaza and why it's okay for you to look at it. Don't look away, right? We should be moved by what's going on in Gaza. We cannot pretend as though things are normal and we just go about our business here inside the United States. We'll talk about that, but I also want to talk about this end times prophecy that so many black people are falling prey to, that has black people who appeal on a regular basis. I mean, nobody's more religious than black people, if you ask me. I mean, as a percentage of our people, like, we are overwhelmingly religious. And part of our belief system is that God is a God of justice. And it absolutely blows me away that a people, my people, black people, who know that God is a God of justice could find themselves on the wrong side of what's happening to the Palestinian people. And I know the root of it. I've been in church. I've been a pastor. I've studied this for decades. I know the root of it enough to know that it is grounded in the idea that this violence will lead to the second coming of Christ. Now, I've covered this before, but I've got to talk about it again. Patreon.com/the BPD show, because we're running out of time in the public show. The last thing I want to leave you here in the public show is that today, if you're downloading the podcast on the 19th of October, there is a global day of fasting that has been called on by the Coalition of American Muslims. And I want to stand in solidarity with them as a Christian man, as a black Christian, and fast with them today. And I'm glad I actually just remembered, because I was just getting ready to go fix myself some coffee. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fast today for peace, for mercy, for the Palestinian people. As a Christian, I'm instructed in the Bible to pray, scripturally, to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And I have no problem praying for the peace of Jerusalem, but I'm also going to pray for the Palestinian people. That's all I have left at this point, right? There's no amount of post that I can make on Twitter. There's no article that I can write. There's no video that I could put out that's going to change this. And so Muslim Americans are calling for a day of fasting today. And the Pope of the Catholic Church, he's called for a global day of fasting next Friday, the 27th. And I will be participating in that day of fasting again, because there's what do you do when there's nothing that you can do, right? And this is really the stage. This is where we are. The one thing that we can do, in addition to joining these fasts and giving your thoughts and your prayers, is to call for a ceasefire, which itself has become almost a radical notion. To call for a ceasefire. I have been attacked. Not to make this about me, but when I call for a ceasefire on social media, instantly my mentions are filled with people who say that I must be anti-Semitic, or that I believe Hamas, or whatever number of ridiculous things that are being said to try to silence voices. But there's no reason, there is no moral justification to suggest that we shouldn't be calling for a ceasefire. Because when we consider all of the confusion, all of the malaise, when we consider how thick the fog of war is, and now people are pointing blame to each other over this particular hospital strike, the best way for us to figure out what's going on is for a ceasefire. The best way to get humanitarian aid is through a ceasefire. And yet, it seems to be a radical notion to call for a ceasefire. I want to leave you with this clip. Again, this is a clip of the protesters who were arrested in front of the White House for shutting it down. Jewish Voices for Peace, along with an organization called ifnotnow.org. Here they are, and they are singing "Not in Our Name." And I think that is the sentiment of so many people. We may not be able to stop this, but we certainly can speak out and use our voices to declare that these atrocities that are happening in Gaza are not being done in our name. We reject it, we condemn it, and we are actively calling for a ceasefire for the hostilities to end.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.